Across the pond.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode from Across the Pond, and we are joined once again today with Sir Toshi, who has done part 1 and part 2 with us. If you haven't listened to them, please go back and listen to them. They're across all platforms live now. Sir Toshi, welcome back.
Thanks very much for having me, Amanda. Great to be back.
Of course. So Toshi's going to talk to us today about deep state. So it's over to you, Sir Toshi.
Okay. So let's go back to where this concept of the deep state started from. So it all starts from this conspiracy that's 3,000 years old. As we mentioned before, that was meant to be an instruction by God in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel 15:3, written 1028 BC, where he said, now go and destroy Amalek, kill everyone, spare no one, kill every man, woman, child, suckling baby, calf, camel, sheep, and donkey. And that's led into, many interpretations, as like in the Talmud, for example, where they say that, every Talmudic Jew is going to have 2,800 slaves each. And these people, what they do is they generally take on the identity of their enemy. So they never reveal who they are. They always pretend to be someone else. But if you look back in time, they really sort of stem from being Canaanites to then Rephaim, which is what they really are, because that's how they're defined in the book of Deuteronomy. And Rephaim in Hebrew just simply translates to the terrible ones. Then later on, they were the Philistines. Then they were known as the Khazarian Mafia. Then they were known as sort of Zionist Jews. But really, what they've done is they've just sort of infiltrated the Jewish religion, claim to be Jews. And they really want to enslave humanity and have a world of their own. And so JFK, in his, I think it was the 1961 speech at the Waldorf Astoria, in the President and the Press speech, I was just listening to it this morning, when he said, we are, if you, something what he says, he goes on about a clear and present danger. He says, because we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. And then he goes on about how big this thing is. And then obviously, because he knew about it, they ended up having to take him out. But as this conspiracy has progressed, what we've now got are certain bodies which pretty much run all the supposedly elected governments around the world. And those organizations are, for example, in London, obviously after the Battle of Waterloo, we knew that the Rothschilds built up the majority of, they bought up the majority shareholdings of all the corporations in London. And the organization that runs London is now called the Institute for International Affairs at Chatham House. So that's the deep state in the UK. We have the Council on Foreign Relations in the US, which was set up by David Rockefeller. He also set up the Trilateral Commission, which is responsible for running Japan and the Far East. And again, they're all in on the Bilderberg Group as well. Which is controlled by the Wallenbergs, because they pretty much control Europe. And that's who the deep state is. They decide who is and who isn't going to be prime minister. They decide who is and who isn't going to lose elections. They pull the levers as to which politicians are going in and which ones are going out. It's literally all controlled. And it was Dominic Cummings who recently said, even all the meetings in Parliament are scripted. For example, even like the Cobra meetings, literally everything is pre-planned and pre-scripted before the Prime Minister even goes in. So it's just literally a complete facade all around the table, because any emergency that goes on, this lot have already orchestrated anyway. So it's just literally an orchestrated plan. And that's really what the deep state is that we need to get out of, because it is we're living in a communist dictatorship and not a democracy. And the only way we're actually going to get out of this is by getting out of their financial system, the fraudulent financial system, that they've created themselves that allows them to print an unlimited amount of economic power for themselves in order to create rich and poor and then extend their plans of divide and conquer.
Are there any other UK politicians coming forward and saying that this information is correct? That this is all pre-scripted, this is just made for the masses to think, like, you know, when they're watching, obviously, the news on TV, or you can watch the Houses of Parliament on TV, that this was all happening real time, where it's actually, are you saying all of it is pre-scripted? Yeah.
All of it is pre-scripted, and those who go off script are brought back into line pretty quickly by either bribery, threats of violence, or blackmail.
Do you have any examples of anyone that you can think of that's went off script? Like, say, I know Trump seemed to go a little bit off his usual script during lockdown time, where he was.
Yeah. So, I mean, a classic example is Andrew Bridgen. Andrew Bridgen went off script, refused to accept an unlimited bribe, in COVID. And, look what happened to him. I mean, what was so ridiculous is that, he had won by a vast majority in his local elections when he was booted out the Conservative Party. And he even said, he was told to keep it. He was told that if he knew what was good for him, he would keep his mouth shut. So he went in as an independent. And I've spoken to Andrew personally on this. And as an independent voter, even though the majority of the constituents knew who he was and voted for him, supposedly in the recent local elections, he only got 6 votes. And yet when he spoke to one of his constituents, the constituent said to him, well, there's 4 of us in our family and all 4 of us voted for you. So they're telling you that you only got 6 votes overall in the entire county, and 4 of them came from our one family. It's just
sounding a bit red flag.
Yeah. The criminality at the moment is literally off the charts. And again, this is why we need Bitcoin, because we need a digital network that can cater for all of the digital requirements, including voting, where data just simply can't be cracked, altered, changed, or deleted. And that's why the deep state are moving so fast now, because they know that if we wake up and we realize this, and we suddenly find out what Bitcoin can actually be used for, which is for the first time, it's an immutable ledger. An immutable, ledger of digital record keeping that can be used in the same way that the internet can be used, for all of our social media and digital requirements, then the truth can't be inverted, subverted, or perverted.
So how have the deep state, in your opinion, been able to implement themselves over such a long period of time and still be in charge, still be in power in any way, shape, or form, especially like in this day and age?
So everything stems. So in terms of how they've manifested their power, because there has to be some kind of power somewhere. It's the central banks. The central banks pay all the politicians. They pay the police officers. They pay MI6. They pay MI5. They pay the military. They pay absolutely everyone. They pay assassins. So literally, anybody who doesn't toe the line, either gets disappeared pretty quick. And like I said, they keep everybody in check with threats of violence, bribery, and blackmail. And also, they own all the mainstream press as well. So anybody who comes out and starts talking immediately gets slandered. And it was a bit like Rockefeller said in his secret covenant. He said, when a light shall shine among them, it will be extinguished by the ridicule or death. And so that's literally how they operate. And if you've not read his secret covenant, then it's essential reading, because it's literally 50 bullet points, which outlines exactly how they're going to handle every single situation and how they're going to achieve their goal. It's brutal reading, but in order to understand, in order to come up with a solution, you have to fundamentally understand the problem and effectively read between the lines. So whenever Rockefeller says, this must never be written down, and this they must never know. Well, the first thing I did was wrote it all down and told everybody.
Well, yes, that's
Yeah.
funny. So, how far back then? I know you were naming through different eras and time and different names that they've had, but how far back does this actually go?
Yeah. It's so again, biblical records say that this conspiracy goes back 3,000 years. That's when
Hmm.
That's when this particular conspiracy started. So it's pretty much
Hmm.
the oldest. Well, it's the oldest occult and hidden religion because
Wow.
it predates Islam, it predates Christianity, it predates
Hmm.
Buddhism. It's literally the oldest religion on the planet, and it's satanic. Unfortunately.
The satanic religion is the oldest religion from
Uh,
what you've learnt. Obviously, is that what you're saying? The oldest religion is the satanic, so Luciferians.
yeah. Because literally, when this instruction was given, when they said, kill everyone, spare no one, kill every man,
Hmm.
woman, child, suckling baby, calf, camel,
Hmm.
sheep, and donkey. I mean, what on earth have the animals got to do with any of this? But this is why they're injecting all the animals with mRNA. This is why they're killing babies. Babies are innocent. And literally, the
Hmm.
with the inspiration that they get from the Baphomet, as I said before, rather than caring for the elderly, they neglect the elderly. Rather than protecting children, they attack the children.
Hmm.
It's literally satanic. There is no other better word or description for it.
Okay, so you personally, just asking, you've read obviously the scriptures that you're referring to, that you're backing, like even this theory or this, I'm not sure what we should call it, but you've read all them scriptures, yes?
Yeah.
Right. Have you ever read? Just asking now. Have you ever read the Satanic Bible?
Actually, I've not read the Satanic
Do,
Bible.
Yeah, the only reason I'm asking is just to see like how you're comparing, or where would you get the information that was saying that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to sacrifice children and old person. I'm just asking because I haven't read it myself personally. But is
Well,
it in there? Is it in their scriptures? It's basically where I'm going with this. So we got like two sides of the coin here, and it always
yeah.
has been. Like, religion is a very powerful thing to guide, I suppose, or control, other people would put it as, the masses. So I'm just
Mm.
wondering, like, if you're saying like this is the why you think they're doing it, is that only because it's only come out of the scriptures that you've read, as opposed to reading, say, the opposing argument, which would then mean you would have to obviously read the Satanic Bible, I suppose.
Oh yeah, so it has come from my readings of the protocols of the Elders of Zion,
Hmm.
Rockefeller's Secret Covenant, um,
Hmm.
listening to many months hours and hours and hours upon end of different
Hmm.
people and what their underlying message is, and it's all the same. And literally,
Yeah.
you can read sort of Rockefeller's Lockstep,
Lockstep.
that they, yeah, I mean, it's all, and also, like the really famous interview that Rabbi Finkelstein did with James Wickstrom, where he literally was
Hmm.
just kind of like, high on hubris and just admitted everything, and he's just like, there's nothing you can do about it, it's over for you white guys, you know
Who
literally he's
who
just
who
like.
who was it?
So this was Rabbi A.B. Finkelstein did an interview with James Wickstrom in 2006, and he he
Right.
just
Okay.
he just admits everything because he says it's too late for you. It's done for you lot. We've got it all planned out. You're so stupid. We're so intelligent. We've stolen all the money. We've got all the
What?
resources. Honestly, yeah, it's all in there, and this is where he literally spills the beans on McDonald's. He's like, look, this is where we get rid of all the kids that we steal, like on the Sabbath. Like he said in the interview, we steal about 300,000 children a year. That's literally like 1,000 kids a day that they steal. And they said that once they've done with them, once they've extracted the adrenochrome, once they've tortured them enough, they then just simply throw them in the meat grinders and feed them to us in McDonald's. Which is why he said we have like hamburgers for lunch, ham, or was it ham and sausage for breakfast and hamburgers for lunch? And he said we feed our enemies' children to themselves.
Wow, that's quite full on.
Yeah, it's brutal, and it makes me sick, but at the same time, it drives me on because it's so wrong. And also, we don't have a choice. They are coming for us, and they already own all the resources. And before Bitcoin, we had no chance. Absolutely no chance. They've nailed everything because they own all the central banks. They've already sold off all the energy companies and utilities to private corporations that they now own and control. And now they're going obviously for the food supply and the farmers, because without food security, you've got nothing, because you need to feed an army. People need to be able to eat in order, put food on the table in order to live. And that's why they're going to, trying to steal the family farms off all the farmers in the country right now. Through through subtle means like increased taxes and all this crap.
Yes.
But what they've done is through due to First and Second World War that was manufactured, they kept farmers on subsidies. So now that farmers are used to living on subsidies, the government has basically got them by the short and curlies and says, well, if you don't do this and this, if you don't do that, if you don't start, putting solar panels on your land, or wind farms, or cutting the amount of food that you produce due to environmental sustainable goals, we're going to cut your subsidies. So they've got the farmers over a barrel as well. We're really in a dire situation.
And this is going on globally, really, isn't it?
Oh yeah. They've already done it in many countries. Like, for example, they've already done this in China. There was a really famous image once of Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller meeting with Chairman Mao. In the, I think it was the 1960s, where they said, China is the most important experiments in humanity, in the histories, because what they're doing is they're using China as a blueprint for everything that they want to implement over here, and they also orchestrated the Great Leap Forward, which was which had the effect of killing between 15 and 55 million innocent Chinese, due to famine and shortages. So, and this is what they're doing over here by weakening our energy infrastructure, by telling us that we should be putting solar panels, relying on solar panels and wind. And it just so happens that this lot manipulate the weather. So if they don't want our solar panels to work, they can just simply cloud the skies over. And if they don't want the wind turbines to work, they can just reduce the wind or blow them over. It's just the situation that we're in is insane.
Yeah, so it wouldn't make a difference, I suppose, based on that theory, whether or not you're trying to help with the global warming problem by reducing your emissions in different ways, shapes, and forms. But yeah, of course, like the panels, I think, are fantastic, and the wind farms are fantastic. But if you're saying that they can manipulate the weather anyway, talk to me more about that.
Well, yeah. So what these solar panels, and these wind farms are meant to be producing is electricity, but there is free electricity from the ether. The ether is 450 feet above us, and it's an unlimited amount of energy. But Rockefeller removed the ether from the periodic table because they don't want people to know about it, because it's the ether that enables us to communicate, telepathically and receive intuition and what's the word? Not astral project, but there's a remote viewing and all this kind of stuff through our pineal gland when we're connected to the ether. But there's also free energy devices like magnetic dynamos, and also cars that run on water through hydrogen. There's all this technology they have already got themselves. And there was the guy that came back from the the technologies that they've built in Antarctica that he says was actually responsible for the earthquake in Christchurch in New Zealand. And he wasn't aware of where they were getting their energy from. He was just guessing that it must have been nuclear because, this thing had already had all the energy there. And again, we've got the Antarctic Treaty where all the countries agreed that they weren't going to, build down in Antarctica. And yet this lot is like, oh yeah, we'll make everybody sign this treaty. And so while nobody's looking, we'll go down there and build this energy device that nobody knows existed. But you can see the energy coming out on the radars, because people are picking up these phenomena. People are picking up the phenomena, and it ties in with exactly what he said. He said they've got this huge energy device down in Antarctica, that they're using to create earthquakes and tsunamis and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah, because they don't allow anyone to go to Antarctica.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's like a absolute no-go zone. You can't fly over it without permissions. You can't land there. Yeah, when they do expeditions there, I think it's only to a certain part, and then that's it. Yeah. Well,
I mean, I also invested. Well, I've done research on Admiral Byrd's findings when he went to Antarctica, saying that he found lands beyond the ice wall, and pyramids down there as well. And I think also when I think it was Buzz Aldrin went down there, he again, a very strange comment. He said, "We have seen the face of evil, and it is real." And there was a group of scientists down there, I think between sort of 10 and 15 scientists, that put out a distress call to say, look, we're in some kind of trouble, like, come and save us. And the US were just like, right, well, we're at least 4 days away from coming to rescue you. But you're just going to have to hang tight somewhat, and hopefully you survive when we get there.
Good luck.
And yeah, exactly. And they said that when they got there, they expected, if there were any surviving scientists, they expected them to be greeting them with open arms and say, oh yeah, thanks for showing up, we really appreciate you. And they said, I think there was like 9 scientists there. Literally, they were all stood there in silence, heads bowed, all of them in complete silence. None of them would say a word, as if they had been completely traumatized. And even when they were on the plane, they didn't say a word. And when they got back, one of the scientists gave a description of what they'd witnessed, which was shape-shifting creatures that they'd come into contact with. And it all sounded very odd, but these things literally, like in the sci-fi movies, when you get a creature that sort of like turns invisible and then appears somewhere else, literally like something out of Predator, and they said this is the story that they got from the scientists that were in Antarctica when they brought them back. So these other people, they, like the elites, they know all of this, because they've obviously had reports from people, and they hide it from the general public like us. Like, they hide it in the Smithsonian Institute. Like, they're getting rid of all the giant skeletons that they found. They found so many giant skeletons that I've heard rumors that they've literally ended up like dumping them overboard in the ocean, because they can't store anymore in the storage facilities that they actually have.
So this goes down to the Nephilim then we're referring to, yes?
Yeah. The Nephilim are the giants, like Goliath back in the day, and Gilgamesh as well. And another thing you might not know is that there was a German archaeologist called Fassbender who actually located the tomb of Gilgamesh on the banks of the Euphrates River. When the Euphrates River started, the banks of the Euphrates River started to recede. And due to scriptures that they had a good guesstimate as to where it would be. And when when he found it, and they announced that they'd found him and filmed it, within 8 weeks of him finding Gilgamesh's tomb, the US had invaded Iraq, and the first thing they did is they went straight to the tomb site, excavated it, and confiscated everything there. That was the first thing they did.
That's interesting. What?
And there were emails from Hillary Clinton to other people in the military saying, yeah, we've located the tomb site of Gilgamesh and the graves of the Nephilim.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on I don't know if you know about the Book of Enoch.
yeah, oh yeah. The Book of Enoch is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely
Yes.
fascinating again, and that was the one that they tried to hide from us. You know, and that was it was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls that they'd found. But yeah, absolutely fascinating. And I when initially you hear about it, you think, oh, that's a little bit far fetched, you know. But when you start looking into it, you're just like, you know, I literally have to, you know, hold my head in my hands, and I'm like, oh my goodness me, this seems real. And like, for example, like
Yeah.
the Ark of the Covenant. You know, if you read religious texts, anybody who carried the Ark of the Covenant always had to wear lead chest plating on their back and on their front, which kind of indicates that there was some sort of like radiation coming from the Ark. And the Ark of the Covenant has actually been found in a church in Ethiopia, and they have, you know, it's meant to be a privileged position to look after the Ark, you know, and be its protector. But everybody who's been given that role, within 5 years, they've all gone blind because they're in close proximity to it. And I can't remember who it was. One of these chaps who reports on these types of things. He said that if you measure the size of the granite, well, they call it a granite tomb because they refer to it as the king's chamber in the pyramid, but he's just like, it doesn't look like a tomb at all. And this kind of like granite sarcophagus looking thing just doesn't really look like a sarcophagus, but they don't know what it would be used for. But he said if you measure the inside of that, then the internal measurements of that sarcophagus exactly match the external measurements of the Ark. So it looks like the Ark of the Covenant was actually probably meant to be placed somewhere in that pyramid for some kind of, you know, energy harvesting or production, something like that. Who knows?
Wow. So what do you think is causing it to be radioactive?
I honestly couldn't say. I would just be speculating. But you know, if you read the Sumerian texts, and you kind of like, read the Bible stories and reinterpret them in another way. And even if you look, I think it's the Dogon tribe in somewhere in Africa. They have knowledge of a star system which can only be seen through high-powered telescopes, and they don't have any technology. But their ancestors have stories of sky people, you know, who came down and gave them the information about these star systems, and gave them knowledge on agriculture and everything else. So and like I said, we're the only species on this planet with different blood types. So it looks like we've been genetically engineered. And so I would say that these Elohim, these sky people, these advanced beings, probably created the Ark.
With Mars, say for example, now we're completely off topic, but I'm loving it. With Mars, say for example, being a dead planet, and what they worked out was, what was it, like 400 or 500 million years ago? They were guesstimating that it had died, say, and within the same type of time frame, Earth had started to, you know, spout life. Do you think there's any corresponding connection between Mars and Earth?
Well, I mean, again, I'm just going on, you know, I don't really trust NASA, but
I don't trust them either.
but you know, if the images are genuine that have brought back from Mars, it does look like Mars used to have life on the planet. You know, you can see remnants of you know, sort of water, rivers of water. That used to run on the planet. And if ever you see Oh, I can't. There's an epic zoom out video of the universe that I often look at because it just blows my mind. And it zooms out from Earth, and it literally zooms out to the cosmic microwave background, which is as far as they can see. And it just makes you realize that, and bearing in mind we can only see stars, and our sun is our star, so our planet doesn't actually give off any light. So each star itself is a solar system, and each solar system is in a galaxy, and each galaxy is in, one of these solar complexes or whatever. I mean, the chances of us being the only living forms of life are just absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And when I think how old the universe is and how primitive we seem to be, in terms of all you've got to do is look at how much the technology has advanced in just
the last
few
agreeing
years.
With this.
I mean,
it's arrogant to think we're the only life forms in entire existence. It is arrogant. I think
one of the US presidents is meant to have made a deal with the Greys, as they call them, in 1954. In exchange for alien technologies, and apparently
I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. It's well documented, and they've got apparently a creature from the future that is a hybrid human that is the way it is due to things that happen in our future that we haven't experienced yet. And he calls himself J-Rod, and he says he's come from the future because of things that happened, at this moment in time. So isn't it strange that J-Rod has come back to this moment in time when we're talking right now, when literally the future of our species literally hangs in the balance as to whether or not it all hangs in the balance due to Bitcoin. If Bitcoin succeeds, then we will succeed as a human race. If not, we will be left to enslavement, and probably, who knows? I mean, I'm beginning to suspect that the elites, the deep state, I actually suspect that they might be being controlled by potentially a non-human entity that is thousands of years old. And the reason I think
this would make sense to me.
Well, the reason I think that is because if you go back to this Sumerian text and the Sumerian kings list, they record rulers back in the day who ruled for between sort of 16 and 25,000 years, and they had lifespans of 30 to 40,000 years.
Anunnaki.
And also even now we still have the expression of blue bloods, which we relate to royalty and rulers. When because I never really understood in the past when somebody would say, he's a real blue blood. I'd be like, what does that actually mean? It's connected to royalty. It runs in the blood. But now, since doing research, I found out that the reason when we bleed, because our blood is rich in iron, when it oxidizes, it turns bright red, whereas their blood was rich in copper. So when they bled and it oxidized, it turned bright blue. Hence the term blue bloods. That's where the term comes from.
Learn something new every day.
There we go. So maybe these elites are blue bloods. Who knows?
There would be only one to test that theory.
Exactly.
But everyone has to give a vial of blood.
Well, that's what they've been doing. They've been tracking they call them the Illuminati bloodlines, and that's why they always come up with a good idea to start with, like ancestry.com. Wouldn't it be interesting to find your heritage and find out where your bloodline comes from, and blah 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 blah. And then they said, we will never sell your data. Well, they just sold the company to one of these Panetera or something like that. With everybody's DNA in there. They're absolutely fanatical about finding, the bloodlines. And I suspect it's because they're trying to find and, weed out the bloodlines of Cain and the bloodlines of Seth. That's what it That's what it feels like to me, to fulfill their religious prophecy of wiping out any, naturally occurring bloodlines that God has created. That's what it seems like.
So this is almost like a war of the worlds, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually seen videos of other people who know of military soldiers working in these underground bases, and they've literally said, whenever you go down there, you're not allowed to use the word you're not allowed to use the name Jesus at all, even if you stub your toe. And he said that they've seen people, literally, they've seen humans working with Nephilim in these bunkers, these Nephilim, like 20 or 30 feet. And they said, they even came out with them and said, yeah, these are Nephilim. We're working with them, and they believe that they're going to be involved in a war with God, and that they're going to win this time because this war took place 78,000 years ago and they lost, and now they're going to have it again. And I suppose
no, please continue.
If you've got a lifespan of 30 to 40,000 years, I'm sure there's probably going to be one of these creatures that have, if you live that long, you're probably going to find a way to extend your life even further. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if whoever it was that God had a war with in heaven 78,000 years ago, it wouldn't surprise me if they're still alive, wanting their revenge. But yeah, it's crazy.
Weren't the Nephilim were ultimately like the workhorses for the Anunnaki?
Oh, so that was the Igigi. The Igigi were the workhorses for the Anunnaki. There was an uprising, and this is why they decided to invent humans. Because they wanted humans to be slaves for them to mine the gold that would help replenish the atmosphere of their planet Nibiru. According to Zecharia Sitchin.
I meant originally when the Anunnaki actually come to planet Earth to apparently mine it for gold, did they not bring Nephilim with them? Now, I know some people say and imply that Nephilim are created by them sleeping with, say, a human, and that's how Nephilim are created. But it's my understanding that Nephilim were brought as their workhorses, as their actual onboard slaves, not the race they had here mining for the gold before they wiped them out and created humans to then do the mining that were a little bit more intelligent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Have you ever heard this theory or not?
I've not, but I'm open to everything. Literally open to everything. This stuff that I've learned over the last few years has just completely changed my view on everything. I would say that previously I used to, previously I would class myself as a rational human being, with common sense, and it's just like all this stuff sounds a little bit wacky, but I never truly looked into it. But when you do look into it, like honestly, I don't think there's too much that would surprise me now, but it's hard for me to deal with because I never ever used to be like this. But because I do a lot of due diligence, and when someone says something like that, it's just like, okay, well, maybe there are element of truth in it, and then you dig and dig and dig and dig and dig, dig until it's just like, and then it's just like the amount of evidence that you accumulate, it's just undeniable,
Yeah.
Wow. And also the narrative fits.
Yes, well, exactly. When it's all, when you're reading some of these things and it's all like kind of adding up, or it's making it make sense over certain things, and you're like, wow, like how did I never know this, or I've just followed what I've been told like constantly throughout all this time. But it's always best to do your own research, definitely, and go down these rabbit holes. I think
the information is hidden from us, and they use the mainstream press as their weaponized propaganda. And if you're none the wiser, like it still really upsets me the fact that I am the age that I am, and my entire life has been, almost my entire life has been a complete lie. I'm absolutely livid because you trust these people. You're just like, oh, somebody else has done the research. That's great. Okay, well, they've told me this story. That makes sense. They must have spent time and energy on this. Why would they lie to me? What have I done to them that would make them lie to me? Because I didn't know about what happened 3,000 years ago. Whereas now I do, and I'm absolutely livid.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend for our listeners to maybe some books, some texts, something they could go down this rabbit hole and maybe find their own rabbit holes on? Any good reads, any good recommendations?
I would certainly recommend Paul Wallace. Paul Wallace on YouTube. He was a pastor previously, and before he retired, and then he used to study all these religious texts. He also runs a channel called Fifth Kind TV, and literally his in-depth reading and translation of all the different texts in the different languages, in Hebrew, in Latin. It's pretty much his discoveries and a lot of his work that opened my eyes to all of this, because like I said, from my point of view, I can look at the economic history and I can follow the money, but the money, the modern day financial system only sort of goes back to Jekyll Island in 1910. Prior to that, it's very, very wishy-washy. Because you're going on hearsay and, different texts and different interpretations and what people have said, and looking at historical events, and you don't even know if they're true. For example, the changing in the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar. We're meant to have 13 months in the year of 28 days.
Yeah, I agree with. Yeah, we should be following the moon cycles.
September is September. Sept is 7, Oct is 8, Nov is 9, Dec is 10. But instead, September is the 9th month. October is the 10th month, November is the 11th month, Dec is the 12th month. They've literally inverted, subverted, and perverted absolutely everything so that we know nothing.
And this is even just for tax purposes. Apparently, the 12-month calendar we're running on now. So yeah.
This is why they give us a month's holiday every year, because we've actually already worked to that month. They were just like, how can we take a month off them and then give them a month back? That's what they did.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then where it concerns like Bitcoin, do you have any information or anything you want to say to our listeners that could maybe get them started on doing their own research? I'm not saying you can invest, doing their own research and deciding if investing is something that they want to do themselves, and going down the same rabbit hole. Or
should we touch on Bitcoin a bit then?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, great. Okay, so just sort of like doing a little bit of economics 101. There are only 4 things that circulate within an economy. You've got goods, services, commodities, and securities. And literally there is nothing else. Everything can come under one of those 4 headings. Goods are manufactured, services are provided, commodities are either extracted or grown, and there's no human barrier to entry, and securities are issued secured entitlement. That's literally all they are. So you only need a medium of exchange when a third party comes in to trade and an economy is created. And so when there's 2 people, you can barter, you can swap like for like. But when a third party comes into trade, you need a medium of exchange that you can use between you to swap and exchange your goods and services, to maintain the value that you can then use at a later date. And the only thing that has common money the only thing that has common value is a commodity. And a commodity, the word commodity, is an amalgamation of 3 words. It's first of all something that's common, that's then been itemized and then uniquely identified. So you can see that in the word commo and then it and then dity. So common, item, identify. And what happens is when you are using these commodities as a medium of exchange, A medium of exchange is a tool that enables, encourages, and accelerates the facilitation of trade, which means they're economically competitive to one another. So what will happen is over time, these mediums of exchange, these commodities, will outcompete one another until everybody settles on just one. And so what happens is when a commodity eventually monopolizes a market due to its ability to be used as a medium of exchange, it becomes a monopoly commodity and recognized as money. That's where the word money comes from, mon being the singular, the monopoly, and the y being the commodity. So that's what money is. Now, if you want to know what the most valuable money is going to be, all you have to do is commoditize the most useful resource. And the most useful resource in today's day and age is digital data. So if you can somehow commoditize a bit of data and you can make that data valuable and you can then use that as a medium of exchange, there is a very high chance that that will probably become the most valuable money, the most valuable money on Earth. But in order for a digital network to be classified as a commodity, the network itself has to go through a process of commoditization, which is neutral organic growth. So initially, there has to be, the starting point has to be common. So in other words, there has to be a common, equal, and reasonable opportunity for anyone and everyone to have started the network themselves, in the same way that gold was in the ground waiting to be discovered by someone. Someone had to have everybody had an equal opportunity to find it. So this is why Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin white paper on the 31st of October 2008, but didn't start the network until the 3rd of January 2009, because he had to provide a 2 months reasonable notice and time frame to give everybody else an equal and reasonable opportunity of starting the network themselves. And then when no one took the initiative, he was just like, okay, well, I've given you the 2 months. Now I'm going to start the network myself under a pseudonym and then step back and just simply let the network grow organically without any central point of influence. That was why he used a pseudonym like Satoshi Nakamoto. And he also used a Japanese pseudonym because Japan is technologically advanced, highly developed, and politically neutral. So it gave him, as a pseudonymous author, the most credibility. Because if he'd given himself a Russian or a Chinese name, they would have had suspicions about his political intentions. And if he'd given himself the name of somebody, a third world name, they would have had suspicions about where he got his knowledge from and why he wasn't coming forward to reap the rewards of such academic acclaim. And Japan is also an island nation with a language barrier and a large enough population that would hopefully enable his identity to remain a mystery while the network was undergoing this neutral organic growth, because he had initially released the white paper in English. So it was only the English people that actually sort of like got the information, but they were like, oh, right, well, there's this mysterious Japanese pseudonymous author that nobody really knows. So, where's the central point? Where's the central starting point there? Who did it? And is he English or is he Japanese? Who knows? But this neutral organic growth phase was scheduled to finish on the 1st of January 2020. And this is why they brought in COVID lockdown in 2020, because the elites realized that they were just like, oh, hold on a minute. This neutral organic growth phase of Bitcoin is about to come to an end. And if Satoshi Nakamoto reveals his identity and people start using a medium of exchange and money that's outside of our central banking system, and they start using the Bitcoin network for all of their social media requirements, well, that means we can't surveil them anymore. And we can't coerce them to do what we want anymore. We literally lose control of everything. And also, because every transaction in Bitcoin has a digital signature attached to it, eventually it would expose their entire network. So literally, Bitcoin is like their kryptonite. They cannot touch it. If they start buying it, then they start restricting the supply and the number starts going up. And if they start using it, well, it's going to expose their network because a digital signature is attached to every transaction. So it's literally the only way out of this. And this is why they had to subvert it in 2017 and create their own protocol and then collude with the crypto exchanges to list their new central bank created protocol as with the ticker symbol BTC. But what they couldn't change was the fact that because if you make a fundamental change to the protocol, and the protocol is effectively a bit of code, it means that the legacy address also changes because you're receiving a different bit of code. So they couldn't change the fact that the legacy addresses in their alternative protocol no longer started with the number 1. And that's how you identify the Bitcoin protocol, through the legacy address beginning with the number 1. And when I started, pointing this out in 2017, well, that's when I got all my channels taken down. And I only had sort of like probably 500 followers at the time. I was a tiny channel. And yet YouTube specifically targeted me because of the information that I was giving out. It's crazy.
Is it what, you weren't wearing a mask at this time, I take it?
So I did develop a character because when the sort of narrative around Bitcoin started to change from, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system from digital gold, store of value, not many use it. I was just like, oh, that's a bit convenient. If you can't use it, if something is useless, it's worthless. Like it's, if I can't use something, it's useless to me. I've got no reason to buy it. It turns into a speculative piece of crap. If something is useful, then everybody starts buying it in order to use it. And therefore,
Yes.
Demand comes in. And that's what made me think, like, hold on a minute. So Bitcoin could potentially solve the issue of an inflationary financial system that causes all the world's social and economic problems. And yet somebody is purposely trying to prevent this from prevailing. And I was like, who on earth would do this? And that's what got me thinking, whoa, how much trouble would we be in if there is a nefarious entity in control of the central banking system? Because this, when you're a bank, everybody, all the financial dealings of those in MI6 and MI5 and the military and the police and the politicians. I was just like, whoa, if you want to be a nefarious entity and you want to, install a totalitarian one world government or something like that, then you need to control a bank. You need to control the money. And so I thought to myself, just in case, if that is the case, I better just start protecting myself just in case. And now I'm really glad I did.
So this all leads back. So even down to this all then leads back again to what we were discussing at the start, which is who and what is the deep state.
So the deep state is effectively the central banking system. That's the manifestation of the deep state is the central banking system.
Is there anything you would like to leave our viewers with today, Sir Toshi?
I would just like to say that there is hope, but Bitcoin is pretty much our only hope. And the real Bitcoin now just simply has the market ticker symbol BSV. But one thing I will actually leave them with is that Satoshi Nakamoto was fairly sure that this lot would attempt to subvert his creation while it was undergoing this neutral organic growth phase. And so he designed the Bitcoin or the Bitcoin network with a memory pool. And the memory pool is where all the data goes before it gets indexed in a block. And the memory pool would more than suffice for all the world's internet transactions. When he said, the internet processes about 13 million internet purchases per day worldwide, Bitcoin can already scale much larger than that with a fraction of the cost with existing hardware. It never really hits a scale ceiling. But that was for transaction volume, very, very small sized bits of data, which just simply represented, a movement of a Satoshi or a small amount of Bitcoin representing representing a financial value. But he knew that memory pool couldn't suffice to absorb all the world's internet traffic, which was all the social media, HD streaming, live streaming, video chats, emails, phone calls, images, social media, everything like that. So he just thought to himself, well, if they do attempt to subvert my creation while I'm away, which I suspect they probably will do, they will just simply have to copy it as is. And they don't know how to scale it because there is a theoretical problem known in the tech industry called the horizontal scaling problem, which is where no company on earth at the moment can process more than 50 to 60,000 transactions per second. Because if you want all of your customers on your program, then you have to replicate the software that that program runs on. And where every time you replicate it, the copy isn't quite as pure as the first. So in the same way as a tape recorder, when you record it over and over and over, eventually by the fourth or fifth recording, the quality is so bad you can't really even listen to it. So the same it's the same issue that the technology companies face with their software. Now, he has solved this unbounded scaling problem with a software and hardware scaling implementation called Teranode, which can process terabytes worth of data. And this is coming on the genuine Bitcoin network, with the legacy address that starts with the number 1, that now has the market ticker symbol BSV. And when that happens, we can start using the Bitcoin network for all of our digital requirements, where the deep state can no longer surveil us, because we're not uploading information onto their corporate servers, and all the information is effectively private and remains behind legacy addresses. They can see a transaction and they can see the size of the transaction, but they can't see what the data contains, and they don't know the living men and women who are behind the transaction, because all they see is a legacy address. So this is literally the deep state's kryptonite, and it's what we need to use for everything once this Teranode implementation comes on board. And what will happen, or what's likely to happen, is that when this volume of transactions comes on the network, the block fee will explode. So each block will probably produce a block fee of multiple millions of dollars, and miners just simply chase profit. And at the moment, the BTC miners are only receiving 3.12 Bitcoin per block, which is about $300,000. Whereas if you've got the genuine Bitcoin producing a block fee of millions of dollars, suddenly they will start moving their hash rate over onto the genuine Bitcoin network, because each block is producing multiple millions of dollars in transaction fees. And then they'll be thinking, well, if we're pointing our hash rate over there and we're spending a large portion of our operating costs on the hash rate, what are we doing holding all these shit coins that we're not using? So they will then probably start dumping their shit coins hand over fist to buy the genuine Bitcoin when they realize the mistake that they've made.
Exactly. Because we had this discussion yesterday, because I wasn't sure what you were referring to when you were saying like the genuine Bitcoin. And so obviously Toshi has sent me some information on this. But I'm hoping that all our listeners, take the initiative if they're interested to go out, do their own research. And obviously, Toshi, you've been in the space for quite a few years now, so you know what you're talking about where it concerns this. Okay, well, is there anything else then before we wrap this up?
Well, obviously, there's a lot more to talk in terms of Bitcoin, but we can probably do that next time with regard to the Bitcoin protocol and how you commoditize data. And then if you want to go into more details, I mean, crikey, we could speak for hours and hours on the straw man and the 1666 Sestu KV Act that they've created, and the high treason that was committed in 1971, and just all the fraud and the high treason that is being committed on us, and how they're going about eroding our constitutional rights. The conversations could just, I've spent years and years and years studying this. So, and it's fascinating stuff, because you're not going to learn or read about any of this in a textbook. I've literally been lucky enough, because of my knowledge in the finance, to be able to share that with other people who needed my knowledge, and I needed their knowledge, of the legal system and the law and all that. And again, of how these satanic, Luciferians operate using, because they're very aware of karmatic debt, which is why they whenever they plot or plan something, they always introduce plausible deniability, so they can say, oh, we never forced you to do that. You were the one that made that choice. Okay, the choice might be no jab, no job, but the choice is yours. We didn't force you. That this is how they operate, and it's heartbreaking when I meet just so many really nice, good, genuine people, and I realize that these evil bastards are literally just trying to kill everybody.
Well, I can confirm for our listeners, this will not be the last you hear from Toshi on this platform. He will be back soon with more talks on Bitcoin and expanding further on his personal research. And thank you so much, Toshi, for being with us today and sharing this information, of course. Thank you so much to our listeners for taking the time to listen. Do not forget to subscribe, guys, and don't forget to hit the notifications bell so you never miss a video. And take care. We'll be back soon. Bye.
Just in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page.
This is a Fox News alert. The Epstein files have been released.
Across the pond.
You're looking at now, sir. Everything that happens now is happening.
Very serious.
Now.